you for joining us. Thank you, Gary Hirschberg, for demonstrating how environmental stewardship and business run the right way can help move us forward, and thank you for your support. Thank you to Matt Wilhelm, who embodies the spirit of service that I know is so natural here in New Hampshire. That idea that if you see something that needs to be different, you see something that needs to change, you don't ask the question, why don't they fix it? Why don't they do this differently? You say, why don't we? Why don't I? And that is the idea that animates our national service vision. And I know it's the idea that animates folks like Matt, both in their service through efforts like AmeriCorps and the extraordinary services going on in your state legislature right now. We just got to get more of it through the veto pen of the governor, which is why we're going to need a nominee with coattails to help make sure that every state in the union gets good leadership. And thanks to all of you for braving some weather that I imagine was arranged just to make me feel right at home, because this is pretty much how South Bend looks in February with our lake effect, and still making it through to spend some time together as we come into the final hours of this process that we've been in for more than a year now. And I know how seriously New Hampshire voters take the responsibility, take the influence, take the thumb on the scale that you have by virtue of being here in this first-in-the-nation primary. And so I know that in addition to supporters who are here, who I want to thank for helping to spread the word, there are folks here who are still thinking through your choices. Same people who maybe came out of curiosity to see me and about 20 other people a year ago. And by 6 months ago, we're starting to winnow the field. In your very New Hampshire way, you'd say things to me like, that speech is pretty good. I think you're in my top 7 now. That was good. And now it's decision time. And it's coming down to this. How do we make sure that we are ready to win and that we are ready to govern with the stakes as high as they have ever been in an American presidential election? And to guide the conversation we're going to have, let me start by asking you to form in your mind an image that I always ask voters to picture, because I picture it every day. And it guides this campaign in many ways. And it's the image of what it's going to be like the first time that the sun comes up over the mountains and lakes of New Hampshire and Donald Trump is no longer the president of the United States. It feels good to remember that day's coming, right? And just to know that one way or the other that day will in fact come, that it is in our future, and that we will be able to put the corruption behind us and put the chaos behind us. And put the tweets behind us. Won't that be nice? I think we're all ready for that. So the question is, how do we make sure that we bring that day about? First of all, I think it means ensuring that we have the strongest possible candidate looking to the future. Because that's how Democrats win. With a message that brings us together. See, when I talk about how much we're looking forward to moving past this presidency, I don't even think that's a partisan statement anymore. I mean, I'm meeting not only so many fellow Democrats who've been working the whole time to make that come about, but here in this state with its famous independent streak, I see so many independents who feel just as passionate about this as dyed-in-the-wool Democrats, and a striking number of what I like to call future former Republicans, who are more than welcome to join us in this struggle, because even if we can't agree on everything, we can absolutely agree that the time has come to turn the page on this president and on the situation that this country is in. That's what we have to do right now. Come together and deliver a solution. But knowing how much depends on bringing Americans together, we cannot risk alienating Americans at this critical moment. And that's where I part ways with my friend Senator Sanders. And I know we're in the neighborhood. He's from right across the river. And I respect his intentions. But I also am so concerned at a moment like this, where we have an extraordinary historic American majority, for example, ready to deliver health care for every American, ready to act to ensure that there is no such thing as an uninsured American, just so long as we don't force every American onto that public plan. That's the opportunity in front of us, or the risk, if we take it all the way to the extreme. This is a moment for bringing as many people as we can into the picture. But a picture where your only choices are between a revolution or the status quo is a picture where most of us don't see ourselves. Right now, we have to harness that American majority ready to come together and deliver big and meaningful change. but expecting that that change can also be accounted for. So when you look at Senator Sanders' math, $25 trillion worth of revenue, a lot of it coming from areas that we could agree on. I think we all agree that the wealthy and corporations need to pay their fair share. I have a harder time agreeing with the idea of raising taxes on the middle class. He's proposed income over $29,000 being taxed to pay for health care plans. But on that, at least let's give credit where credit is due, because he's being honest about it. But here's the problem. There's $50 trillion worth of spending. So about half of it is unaccounted for. And there's no explanation for where the other $25 trillion is supposed to come from. How are we going to pay for it? Are we going to pay for it in the form of still further taxes? Or are we going to pay for it in the form of broken promises? Either way, we have to choose a responsible approach that can actually get big things done and answer the question of how we're going to get from point A to point B. One thing I've also seen about New Hampshire is a famously practical body of American voters. Ready to envision big things, but insisting that there is a roadmap for how to get there. And the moment that we live in is one with an extraordinary majority ready to do bolder things than we've ever done. An American consensus that would help make the next presidency the most progressive we've yet had, and yet can do it together as long as we don't go chasing after the extremes. Think about it. Even more than what was available to President Obama just 10 years ago. We have an American majority right now ready not just to make sure there's no such thing as an uninsured American, but ready to make sure there's no such thing as an unaffordable prescription. We are ready right now to bring an end to the era when corporations can pay $0 on billions of dollars in profits, and ready to raise wages and empower workers, including gig workers and others in an economy that's rapidly shifting. We have an American majority ready to act to honor our troops, not just with a bumper sticker, but with an end to endless war and a commander-in-chief who would never send them into harm's way without a good reason. A strong American majority here in the state that goes by the motto of live free or die, that understands that American freedom includes keeping government out of the business of dictating to women what their reproductive health care choices ought to be. Ready to ensure we take the steps now in our time to make this a country where your race has no bearing on your health or your wealth or your access to excellent education or your experience with law enforcement. We are ready to go now to take those steps. This is a country that supports our next generation, supports our schools, and supports our teachers, and insists that the next Secretary of Education be somebody who actually believes in public education. This is the majority we must galvanize, not polarize, not only in order to win, and it is so important that we win, but in order to govern. Don't let anybody tell you got to choose between listening to your head and listening to your heart, between the best way to govern well and the right way to win big. All of that turns on harnessing this American majority and adding to it with as many people as we can, so that we win so big that we not only bring an end to the Trump presidency, but we put Trumpism in the dustbin of history with it. And I got to tell you that the stories that strike me the most on the campaign trail are not just encounters with voters, they're encounters with Americans not yet old enough to vote, asking some of the most searching and memorable questions of this campaign. An 11-year-old sticks up his hand at an event to ask what's going on with the affordability of prescription drugs. Not because he's an emerging healthcare policy buff, but because he needs insulin and he's wondering whether his family will continue to be able to afford it and whether he will when he leaves his home that he grew up in. He shouldn't be worried about that. We should take care of that so that he doesn't have to, and he can't wait for us to act on the affordability of prescription medication. A 13-year-old let me know that she had asked for a bulletproof backpack for Christmas. I didn't even know that was a thing that existed. We're living at a moment where kids are getting active shooter drills before they were old enough to learn how to read. They can't wait for us to act to make sure the Second Amendment can no longer be twisted into an excuse to do nothing at all on gun violence and protect our children. And when a 10-year-old who got off on the right foot with me because he showed up at an event in a rolled-up white shirt and a blue tie and let me know that he had been elected mayor of his class at school, raises his hand and very politely points out that he's planning to be here in the year 2100. And that when he is, he will look back on what we did in 2020 and ask whether we took the steps necessary to create a climate that he and his future kids and grandkids could thrive in. He and that generation cannot wait for us to act on climate change and lead the world in doing something about it. The time is now. We have got to act. And this is our chance to make it happen. This is our shot, our only shot to defeat Donald Trump. I know that last week was depressing for a lot of us watching the news, watching the way the Senate GOP turned a trial into a sham and a foregone conclusion. And I know that that creates a sense of exhaustion that may tempt some of us to turn it off and walk away altogether, which is, of course, exactly how the cynics would win, exactly what we cannot allow to happen. But the good news is, the great thing about being a voter in the year 2020 is that we get the final say. The Senate may have been the jury last week, but we're the jury now, and the final verdict is up to us when it comes to this president and an awful lot of those senators. So let's make sure we use that power to bring about the change we need to see. This is our chance. And this is our opportunity to turn the page and deliver on the issues that the next president will face, some of which were barely even thought of a few years ago. Not only climate change leaping off the pages of science journals and into our lives, but overseas threats like global health security problems and cybersecurity attacks. And right here at home, an economy being radically transformed by technology, by gig work, things we weren't thinking about just a few years ago. Now's our chance to do something about it. And in that process, to also just establish a sense of public decency once again, where even or especially when we disagree, we do not forget that we are part of this same American project. The way service members are reminded, working together under tough conditions, trusting one another with their lives, and the way each of us can be reminded just by participating in the extraordinary civic ritual that is the democratic process. This is our chance to get it right. And this, I believe, is what the presidency is uniquely able to help guide. That it's not just about the laws that you sign. It's not just about the administration that you run. It is about the tone that you set. That is part of the function of this office. To put it another way, I'm seeking this office not because I got it into my head that I'd like to occupy it, but because of what it can do and what it is for. I'm asking for your vote because I believe the presidency has a purpose. And the purpose of our American presidency is not the glorification of the president, but the unification and the empowerment of the American people who do these big things. That's why I'm asking for your support, and that's why I hope you'll vote for me tomorrow evening. So, having shared what I'm about, I'd like to invite Representative Matt Wilhelm back out. We've gathered up questions from folks on your way in. He's got our famous fishbowl. This one's our famous bucket. And looking forward to having a conversation. If it's your question, give a holler, so I'm looking in the right direction.
All right, this first question is from Tyler Austin. Where's Tyler? Right there. Tyler's question is, what's your plan with mental health and the youth struggling with it?
Thank you, first of all, for raising this, because this is so important. And this is another example of where it's partly about policy and it's partly about culture. So the policies are clear. We need more providers in the mental health field to begin with. We need to make sure that reimbursement and compensation is high enough that it encourages more people to go into the field. One of the things we talked about in national service is a community health corps that would give people who are entering public service a year of experience helping on issues related to addiction or mental health, and in that process, hopefully inspire some of them to make it a career. We need to make sure that we decriminalize addiction and that we make it possible for there to be more prescriptions for the kind of medication-assisted therapy that we know is an important part of battling a lot of addictions. So there's step after step after step we need to take policy-wise and fund it federally. But recognize that a lot of the issues are different in different parts of the country. And so we call them healing and belonging grants that are federally funded but based on locally designed plans. This is maybe a mayor's eye view of the world, but I think not all of the answers have to come from Washington, but more of the funding should. So those are some of the policy moves we got to make. But in order for us to change the policies, I think we've got to change the way we as a country talk about this too. And this might be the most important thing of all. This is worth doing, actually. I do this sometimes. Just ask you, if you or somebody you love, somebody in your workplace, or somebody in your family has encountered an issue with serious mental illness or with addiction, just a quick show of hands. Okay. So this is just about everybody. So how is it that we still talk about it like it's some specialty issue that just affects a handful of people? This is all of us. All of us are affected by this, and we need to create a culture, and I will set this tone from the top, where it is as routine to go seek an emotional health checkup as a physical, as natural to talk about a struggle with bipolar disorder as it would be to talk about a struggle with cancer, as okay to let folks know you're facing addiction as to let folks know you got a knee surgery coming up. If we do that and remind those who are facing these struggles that you have nothing to be ashamed of, it makes all of the other pieces a lot easier, and I promise to set that tone and work with everybody to speak up and raise these issues so that they're fully heard.
All right. This next question is, how will you rewrite a country with historical polarization? Ezra Klein says that the right plays identity politics while the left waxes a something policy. No one listening or hearing. Whose question is that?
Okay. Did we get it right?
I just said, how would you unite historically polarized?
Yeah. So, well, first of all, I think that analysis is right. The White House has mastered a form of white identity politics that is destructive to everybody. And this is a moment when we need to come together, not by papering over our differences. We should acknowledge and celebrate identity. But the way it's being weaponized by this White House is frightening. And this isn't just about policy. This is about whether everyone has an equal share and claim on the American project. I think that's one of the fundamental questions at stake right now. And whether we're talking about racial injustice, systemic racism, and racial inequality, which in many ways, by the way, has actually gotten worse in our time. Proof that simply deleting a racist policy and replacing it with a neutral one isn't enough to bring us to equality. Or the political division that's going on in all kinds of directions, which, by the way, is also being cleverly weaponized and exploited by our adversaries. Because our divisions have become a national security vulnerability known to places like Russia as something that they can drive wedges through. This will not be easy to overcome. But so much depends on us getting this right. And the first thing I'll say, as far as the plan to deal with it, is that it can't just be the president. This president said, I alone can fix it, when he took office. Never believe anybody who says they alone can fix it. But here's what can make a difference. First of all, again, the tone that you set. Secondly, making sure that we back it up with policies that create a shared reality. This is why we're so passionate about national service. When I was deployed, people so different from me, not just racially or regionally, but politically, for sure, philosophically, would be in my vehicle. And they didn't care if I was going home to a boyfriend or a girlfriend or what country my dad immigrated from. We trusted each other with our lives because we had a job to do. Part of the virtue of national service is helping more Americans get that experience without you having to go to war in order to get it. And I'm looking for opportunities to break down those barriers so that we just have a shared experience of reality. It's why quality public education is so important. If public education is something that everybody from every walk of life seeks out, then schools become part of that place where the community building happens. It's why I believe in cutting across different media bubbles. It's a bit controversial within my party, but I don't hesitate to go on Fox News quite often. Because how can I blame somebody for not hearing our message or our view if they've literally not encountered it? Which means I have a responsibility to make sure it gets through to those viewers. And that's why we do those town halls. So the more we act to make sure that we're in a common reality, the more we can see the humanity in one another. This is a moment where we should look through everything from shared stories to shared lived experiences on ways to bring us together, even or especially when we disagree. It's not pretending we won't disagree. That's okay. But we have to be part of the same effort at the end of the day. And this is instinct for a mayor. Because when you're a mayor, you are a walking symbol of the unity of your city. You remind people who have nothing in common besides the city they live in that they have something in common there. And that's even more true for the job of the president. That's part of how a president earns their paycheck, in addition to all the policy work, is making sure that you are a touchstone that reminds people they're part of America. And that's where I firmly believe that Democrats and independents and Republicans, people of different generations and religious traditions and races, we can't even bring together ice cream and yogurt to know that we are part of the same overall reality. And especially when we disagree, to do it in the name of the shared American values that unite us as a country.
All right, so this plays off that same theme. How do you plan to unify the Democratic Party and the country?
All right. So here's the good news. This is primary season. It's the heat of competition. Elbows will find their way out a little bit. But we really do share the same values, certainly broadly as Americans, but very specifically as Democrats. So the differences we're talking about are differences mostly in approach, not differences in where the country's got to go. Not only within, but beyond the boundaries of the Democratic Party, folks agree that we need to raise wages and empower workers and support the future of education, do something about climate, keep each other safe from gun violence. It's very clear what we've got to do. The question is just how are we going to go about doing it? And I'm making the case for us to do it with a look to the future, and for us to do it in a way that includes as many people and alienates as few people as possible. And look, let's remember, at the end of the day, the 25 people, something like that, ran for president in my party. Approximately 24 will not get to be the nominee. The moment we've identified the one who is, all of us have to unify around that person and get the job done.
All right, so this is the last question. If you become the nominee and take the debate stage next to President Trump, do you confront him on his lies and bigotry, or hold back for fear of offending his base?
So here's my approach. And again, if that was you, give away, so I'm looking in the right direction. Although I imagine that's on a lot of people's minds. Here's how I approach this president. He's kind of like, you ever seen those Chinese finger traps where the harder you pull, the more you get stuck in them? He's kind of like that, but with our attention. He has this knack for commanding our attention through outrage. So here's the trick. When he lies, you have to confront him. When he does something wrong, you have to stand up to it. And yet, a big part of this is to make sure he can't suck all of the attention in his direction. So, will I call him out? Absolutely. And I think I'm the right person to do it. You know, somebody who talks about the forgotten men and women of the country, but views my part of the country mostly as a place that he can look down on out of his window in between going to golf courses with his name on it, ought to have to stand next to somebody who's not a millionaire, actually lives in a middle-class neighborhood in an industrial Midwestern city. This is the exact kind of community that he has claimed to speak for, but sold out when it comes to his actual policy. Somebody who likes to cloak himself in religion. This president, ought to have to debate someone who is not afraid to remind fellow believers that God does not belong to a political party. And yes, somebody who avoided serving when it was his turn ought to be called to account on a debate stage by somebody who can talk about the meaning of service and illustrate why somebody who punishes war heroes and pardons war criminals is no patriot. I will do that. But having said all of that, I will do that quickly and return to what matters most, which is how our individual lives go differently depending on who's the next president. Remember, we're the ones trying to get you a raise. We're the ones prepared to deliver health care to everybody. We're the ones ready to do something about climate change and gun violence. We are ready to make this happen. And the discipline that's going to be required on that debate stage will be to deny this president his famous power to change the subject. Because the less we're talking about him, the more we're talking about you. And the more we're talking about you, the more we're going to win. That's how we're going to defeat Donald Trump. One more thank you to Matt for guiding our discussion.
I had the great privilege as a producer at ABC to travel with both the George H.W. Bush campaign and the Clinton campaign, along with my colleagues, the late Cokie Roberts, and my good friend Andrea Mitchell. I've interviewed many hopefuls, and I have to tell you that I have never, ever been as energized by anybody as I have Mayor Pete. Mayor Pete for bringing grace and dignity back to this country. For being a beacon of light, of hope, and of opportunity. To reflect on something you said earlier. The sun will come out tomorrow. Bet your bottom dollar that tomorrow. Don't let me do this alone. So, thank you for being such a champion.
Thank you. Well, I don't know how to top that. Other than ask you to bottle that energy up, bottle that joy up, bottle up whatever hope propelled you into this room. Because I believe strongly that running for office or being involved in a campaign is an act of hope. That's why they call us hope. You notice this? I'm a hopeful. That's what they call us in the news. We're hopeful. And we're hopeful because we believe action matters. Who gets their hands on the pulleys and levers of the American government? And what values are guiding those hands? And if we get it right, we will not only bring an end to a period in our political history that is so dark, but that sun will come up. And we will be working together in a way that makes us proud. I don't believe that because I am young. I don't believe that as a matter of naivete. I believe that as a matter of experience. Having seen in a war zone what Americans can do to work together, having seen in my own city how a place left for dead can pick itself back up, having seen in my own life how even our complicated and troubled political system can deliver better rights over time, like the simple fact that I'm standing in front of you wearing this wedding ring. We can bring about a better day.